Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Butterface, TalkSport's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, and Arsenal's former winger Perry Groves. He won the title, you know, and he thinks they're going to win it again. All right, Perry, all excited, are you?
Yeah, still.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Still
going to win it.
Still?
Yeah, there's a draw there somewhere.
I don't know where it is. Are you okay?
I'm good.
Good weekend for you, no Manchester United.
Yeah, didn't lose. Happy days. Wait until Monday night.
Chelsea in great form. Anyone want to mention that?
We'll do later on, won't we? Just a little chat about Chelsea, West Ham.
I was at Brighton today. Brighton did very well. You were at Chelsea today. You couldn't be bothered to go to Liverpool today because you said that it didn't really mean anything. And it didn't really, did it?
No, they weren't my exact words, but did you know what? It turned into a decent game in the second half, but we'll get on to it. Is 4-2 the most flattering scoreline you've ever seen? It could have been 7 or 8.
Could have been. You enjoyed the Chelsea-Wolves game and you behaved yourself, which is a good thing, because last week you didn't.
I was football neutral. I said I've had a blood transfusion, so now for the sake of the football community, I am football neutral.
You might have seen lots of internet articles about our good friend Perry Groves starting a riot at Tottenham when he stood up, took his shirt off and twirled it over his head when Arsenal scored their third goal in the North London derby, which was unprofessional. Bad etiquette.
I thought the caterpillar was a bit strong, actually, celebration. I got all my jumper dirty.
It's not funny.
No, it's not strong.
Right, let's get on with reviewing the weekend's footballing action and take a look at the top of the table, Arsenal and Manchester City in cruise control. Wolves beat Manchester City earlier in the campaign and the champions exacted their revenge in ruthless style at the Etihad Stadium. 4 goals for Haaland, put him on 25 for the season. He tops the goal scoring charts. He started a war of words with Roy Keane, telling the TV afterwards, "I don't care what that man says." Keane was also critical of Haaland's behaviour when he was subbed off too. But before we get into the more wider debate about Manchester City, was this game too easy?
Probably. I mean, Wolves fans will point to the first penalty and maybe claim they were harshly done by. That argument really only holds water if you go on to lose narrowly, but it was a convincing victory for City. And I wasn't surprised. 1 win in 9, I think now for Wolves, probably the ideal opposition. And actually, if you look at City's last 3 games, Perry is praying for a miracle. They've got Fulham, who look like they're on the beach. They've got Tottenham, who've completely fallen off a cliff. And they've got West Ham, who are in no form at all. If you could hand-pick 4 teams to play when you need wins at the end of the season, you'd probably stumble upon those 4.
He's got a point.
That gives me more hope. If he's saying that it's done and dusted, I know it ain't. Do you know what I mean? I know his form when he has his bet. So that's even made me more optimistic.
That penalty wasn't a penalty though, was it?
No.
It was never a penalty.
No, because when Vardiol gets his shot away, then like the coming together, it's a normal football coming together. You know, Aït-Nouri just thinks he's going to clear it. So as a gooner, that game, the jeopardy was in it because obviously we'd won the 12:30 kickoff and run it comfortably. We should have beat Bournemouth. It could have been
a couple of slightly dubious decisions in that game as well. Let's not be hypocritical.
I know you're the South
here.
Coast correspondent, but let's be. Ryan Christie should have been sent off for his over-the-top tackle on Bukayo Saka, so that could change the game completely anyway. So
but back to City.
Yeah, but back to City. What we needed was that game to go half hour, 35 minutes without City scoring. So I'm not saying because they're like a Rolls Royce of a team, but you just want to put that little bit of doubt in their mind. That penalty after 12 minutes and like Haaland scores, then everybody goes, well, that's game done and dusted.
Well, and that is the problem, isn't it? And this is something that I stumbled upon when I was looking at some of the games from yesterday. I read a few articles. I mean, people just basically complaining about the match itself. Are City as boring as people were saying, or are they just jealous? I mean, I read a couple of articles, the tone of which was no jeopardy, no atmosphere, no excitement, not much to get your teeth into. It almost felt inevitable from the minute that first goal went in fact, from the first whistle. Many people just don't enjoy watching them play because basically they're more like a lab experiment than a football team. I heard done an article that said actually Manchester City are just like a maths problem. They go on the field, put the numbers together, and it adds up to a victory. Do you feel like that watching them, or are we all being churlish because we're not Man City fans?
Well, no, I felt like that for a while. I think they're a difficult team.
Who do you support?
They're a difficult team to commentate at times because it is so dominant. It's pass. I think if I had a choice, would I buy a ticket to watch City or would I buy a ticket to watch this Arsenal team? I think it would be Arsenal. That's nothing to do with my allegiances. They are a bit robotic and it is all a bit too easy. But I don't think we should necessarily hammer them for that. I think we also have to stand back and admire
It's not about
the
hammering
brilliant
for
high
it.
standards that they've set and been able to maintain.
Hold on. Like Man City fans, right? They're not bored by watching their team dominate, right? No,
It does get a bit boring when you dominate. I can speak from experience. It does.
isn't.
You
Winning,
start to take it all a bit too easy. You get a bit complacent.
winning isn't boring, Crookie. Winning isn't. Trust me, it's not boring. And if Man City go on to win 4 on the trot, right, then everybody should doff their cap and say it's one of the best Premier League teams that we've ever seen. We've one of the greatest managers we've seen. With the caveat, which you all know is the 115 charges that are going to come. So that might give you a different slant. But Man City fans won't give a rat's because they've had that brilliant time. They've had the joyous
That's
moments.
not what I'm talking about. I know that Manchester City fans are absolutely in love with Pep Guardiola, his team, and whatever they do, fine, enjoy it. But I'm talking about the reputation of the Premier League. You know, we sell this as the most exciting league in the world. Every game seems to have us on the edge of our seat. But Manchester City games don't really have us on the edge of their seat, do they?
Well, to be fair, we pushed them to the limit last season. And
Not really.
Not
We did.
really.
Well, Saliba got injured, and then that's when we had the 2 draws at
How many points
Anfield
they
or
went by
whatever.
last season?
But it was still going until like end
February.
of April. It was at end of April. He's so jealous that like Man United is so bad, and he's
not jealous.
right. And we've got to credit Liverpool for what they've done under Jurgen Klopp's reign by pushing them and pushing them. So the bar's been raised.
But they've never faltered, right? So therefore you lose that sense. Even if I was looking at the table
Was
right
you
now.
bored when Chelsea were winning like Premier Leagues?
No,
like
but
Premier Leagues?
when they faltered and they under Mourinho and they went to 13th or whatever it was that year, and they had to fight back towards the end of the season to get into the top half of the table. Yeah, it was much more exciting. You know, there's something a little bit. You know, there's texture in everything, isn't there? You need a bit of light and shade. But my point is that if you're when you go back to your argument about Manchester City and the idea of them being the greatest team that's ever lived,
I said the great
that's
said one in the conversation of one of the greatest teams because there's Chelsea teams that could be in the conversation.
But the
There's Man United
the
teams could be
wider
in there.
context here is that Manchester City don't falter. So I looked at the table and I was saying, right, okay, well actually Arsenal are top of the table. Why don't we feel like Arsenal can still win the league? Well, because Manchester City are hunting them, and if they win all their games, they will be the champions. And because the recent history says they've never faltered. Liverpool have taken to the last day of the season twice, and they've won it twice. Arsenal have taken them to within 3 or 4 games at the end of the season, and they've won it. They've come from behind to win it. Again, they've come from behind. They'll probably win it this time around. In the end, you lose the hope of jeopardy and the excitement of a title race, because even when it is close, you all believe in the end that Manchester City are going to win it. Does that devalue the product? Does it dilute the excitement in the product? That's the question. I'm not battering Manchester City. I know they're great. I'm just asking a question about the wider reputation of the Premier League.
I think it is a legitimate question, and I think we do have to get away from club allegiances. It isn't about that. There does feel like an inevitability that City are going to end up picking up the trophy on the final day of the season, particularly when you look at the fixtures, as I've already mentioned. And I guess the issue you've got is, I was really impressed with Arsenal. In that first half against Bournemouth, I thought they were sensational. I'm not sure what Arsenal can do. If they don't win the title this year, what can they do, assuming Guardiola is still there and City will add 1 or 2 players in the summer? How can they take their game onto an even greater
It's
height?
demoralising, right?
No, because you have to, like Arteta will say, you have to raise your standards. And we're forgetting, and obviously I'm a gooner, I don't know if you know, but it was in Arsenal's hands.
Everyone in Tottenham knows, yeah.
It came into Arsenal's hands, and the Aston Villa game, where we get beat 0-0 at half-time, and then Arsenal got nervous in the second half and got a bit jittery and didn't know how to handle it. That's how you have to improve yourself when you're chasing teams like Man City. And if Arsenal get a centre forward, which everybody knows, that'll improve them as well.
But that's why he would go and watch you and not watch them, because he thinks you're human and you might fail. So there's a danger in what you do. Whereas when you watch Manchester City, there's no danger. It feels like whatever you're promised when you go in, you know that actually you're going to get it by the time you get to the end of the game.
Yeah, but I'll go the other way. I said we'd win it at the beginning of the season. Said we'd win it, and I still think there's a draw there. Fulham, come on, the Fulham boys, because you never know what with Fulham.
You do.
They're a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. They can get a performance and a draw, but I said at the beginning of the season I didn't think that because they'd won the treble, Man City, at any sport you have to have that desire and that edge. and that winning mentality. And I'm going to say, if they go on to win it, I will say hats off, because to keep that edge design and Pep Guardiola keep pushing and pushing and pushing him, then I think that's something to be admired.
And of course you'll say that because, you know, it would also cover Arsenal's failings, won't it?
No, not at all.
But that does go back to my previous question. Will Arsenal ever get a better opportunity to finish ahead of this Man City side? And I'll take you right back, actually.
Why is it
You and Adrian Durham had a very
so
heated
negative.
debate after the game at the Etihad, when Adrian felt like it was a big opportunity missed by Arsenal. City were without a couple of key players. They weren't at their best. And Arsenal were much more cautious than they have been over the course of the season. Was it a missed opportunity, was the question that Adrian asked you at the time. And if you end up losing out on the last day of the season, you've mentioned the Villa game. Do we go right back to that Man City game and think, well, if Arsenal just showed a little bit more attacking intent, they could have taken the title there and then?
No, but you can analyse it. You could go back to...
You still think that was a good point?
Yes, I do. If you take 8... You're saying how great Man City are, right?
They weren't great that day,
No,
though.
but Arsenal have taken 8 points off of Man City and Liverpool this season, right? Man City haven't beaten Arsenal. Arsenal, you could go back to the Fulham game where we get beat 2-1 at Craven Cottage, go back to the West Ham game at home, we get beat 2-0. So it's not that you can't just isolate one game and go, that's it. There's all little circumstances that and then transpire to why we might not win the title. So then what you have to do is you have to make sure that you're improving and improving and improving. And Arsenal have improved from last season to this season, because everybody said, oh, they bottled it, they lost their nerve. I said, Saliba got injured, that's the reason. But you have to make sure that you improve. So I don't find, like, if you give me a choice, Liverpool at their peak and Man City at their peak, you know, on the mayhem football Liverpool play, I can understand as a neutral you'd rather watch Liverpool, but when we're watching football and as a connoisseur and you're looking at football, you've got to just start using Man City,
also,
so
I suppose,
how good they are.
What we're saying, and we all accept that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the one thing that's coming
for Man City anyway.
One thing that's coming across is that no one is criticising Manchester City. What we're saying is that they're almost too good, and that's the issue here, really. And what you said about Liverpool is again interesting, because there was that fallibility about them. It's last-minute goals. It's getting over the line right at the end. That's the bit about Liverpool that you like watching, the fact that sometimes things go wrong and they have to put it right. Whereas with Manchester City, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. And obviously they won the treble last season, but you go back to United's treble, the number of times they had to come from behind with last-minute goals, etc.
The 99 final is a prime example of that. But obviously, look, you know, they've done a very good job, and even watching them on Saturday, I thought this team could have won by 7 or 8 goals without really breaking a sweat. And Haaland probably could have got most of them. On the Arsenal game itself, it was a professional, slick job. We know that. We mentioned there was a couple of iffy decisions. I mean, there was 3 spurious decisions. Christie should have been sent off. The penalty's soft.
It's a penalty.
And the goal that was chalked off for Bournemouth shouldn't have been chalked off.
No, it was that again. That's a football coming together with David Raya and Solanke.
Not even sure it was coming together.
Yeah, well, referees again trying to see something that's not really there. So I agree with you. That would have made that game more interesting. That was 2-0 at the time. If that goes 2-1,
And they played well second half, Bournemouth.
they played better. Yeah, exactly.
I tell you, who did play well. Lewis Cook.
Well, Lewis Cook
How
and
can Lewis Cook have been overlooked? He's played 35 games this year. How can he have been overlooked for an England squad when we're desperate for a midfield player?
And he's playing better now than he was when Gareth picked him first time round.
and he plays in the
Slightly
role.
different England team, though.
When you see Bournemouth play, which you've seen them a lot, he plays deeper, and Ryan Christie plays about 7 or 8 yards in front of him. So he is actually the anchor.
He's a defender.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, basically, he's a defender, isn't he? He plays centre half, as he did in the second half in that game. Lovely last-minute goal for Declan Rice, but the touch for the Trossard goal was next level, wasn't it? I mean, when he receives it on the half turn, just lays it off so beautifully, almost nonchalantly.
But Graham Souness said that Declan Rice can't see passes. You should remember when he said
Not
105. What's that? No,
Not
it was
your
just
better.
because
Don't hold a grudge.
The reason he couldn't see a pass when he was at West Ham, he had no one to pass to, because when he was running forward, then West Ham played counter-attacking football. And the thing about Declan Rice is, he does the same thing in the first minute what he does in the 97th, because we were 2-0 up. Normally you'd be looking at that going, look, I'm a midfield player, we're 2-0 up, I'll just sit here, be all right. And he does that lung-busting run to get himself into the 18-yard box, and his finish was different class as well. So
it was brilliant, because Stuart Pearson said halfway through the game, I think Declan, when it was only 1-0, Declan just needs to get up the pitch more and get involved and have a hand in more goals. It was giving him a bit of stick. He goes, 105 million, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then he went, yeah, I think he's acceptable.
Well, the pass that you said, that's past what they call pass appreciation, where he made Trossard's mind up for him that he was going to do it the first time. With the outside, you go on, then I'll just roll it into your path and I'll bend it in.
He's been pretty impressive since arriving at the club. His role's changed slightly as well, hasn't it, with the introduction of Partey?
Partey gives us a different dimension because he's got the passing ability of Jorginho, but he's got the physicality then
he's not got
to
the
get himself back.
Bit of Jorginho.
He has. He passes it through people. He passes it through in between people.
I spent Saturday night having my ear torn off by an Arsenal fan who has been telling me for God knows how long about how much he was desperate for Jorginho to replace Partey because, unfortunately, Partey's passing range is just nowhere near as good as Jorginho.
No, Partey goes through. He passes through into Odegaard. He goes into Havertz. So he gets us on the front foot a lot quicker.
Okay, Saka, 20 goals this season.
Yep.
The last player to score 20 goals in a season was Aubameyang. Who was the youngest? Saka is the youngest player since who to score 20 goals in a season for Arsenal? 1986-87. You were in the team.
86-87?
Yeah.
Who scored 20 goals?
The youngest player since this guy.
Martin Hayes.
Correct.
Wow.
Well done.
Brilliant.
I'll tell you what, I was on the bang on the president. You imagine the stick I'd have got if I hadn't got that.
Those WhatsApp groups would have been going crazy. Let's take a look at the battle for Europe now as Spurs lose again. And is it time you gave Eddie Howe an apology? Get on to Eddie Howe in just a second. Liverpool beat Spurs 4-2 on Sunday afternoon in a rip-roaring contest where defending was optional. Liverpool didn't really have much to play for, really. They aren't finishing outside the top four, probably not going to finish any lower than third. Spurs knew before the game, though, that Villa had lost, right? They didn't have like a transmission problem in Liverpool where they couldn't get the result from earlier in the day. They knew there was a possibility that they could still get top four, right? Because they did not play like that.
I think for the first hour of that game, it was probably as poor as they've been under Postecoglou. I mean, we know the way that Tottenham are going to play now. They're so easy to play against. If you're the opposition manager, you must be licking your lips. The number of times that Liverpool found themselves 4-on-3, 4-on-4, you can't do that at Anfield. Liverpool not in fantastic form, but you can't gift the opportunities that Tottenham did. And it's a record number of defeats on the spin now, first time in 20 years since David Pleat was in charge. I saw another stat. If they don't beat Burnley at the weekend, then Ange Postecoglou's win percentage in the Premier League will be the same as Nuno Espirito Santo. And there are some Tottenham fans who are just starting to question this lack of a plan B.
Listen, Stuart Pearce was right against Newcastle, wasn't he? He said you don't have to be an experienced football watcher to know how to play against Tottenham. An 8-year-old with any interest in the sport can tell you, you pick the ball up, you put it over their high line, and from set pieces you stick it under the crossbar and crowd the goalkeeper. Easy. And that is the problem. The fact is Liverpool had the opportunity to miss so many chances. They could be profligate, they could take their time, and they could score at will, and they did.
That goes back to the Chelsea game with Spurs, wasn't it, when Jackson gets his hat-trick.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I've got a little bit of a statistic for you. Since the 1st of November, that's when the Premier League table, if you drew the Premier League table then, they'd be 11th. Since then, they have failed to win 15 of their last 25 games. 15 of the last 25 games. It's been going on for ages, this. The only teams with fewer points in that period, from November to now, are Burnley, Luton, Sheffield United, Forest, Brentford, Palace, Brighton and Fulham.
Wow.
But he's over a whole season. And if you'd have said to Spurs fans, beginning of the season...
Basically, they just had a good start.
Yeah, I know, but you're allowed to have a good start. But if you'd have said Spurs fans at the beginning of the season, you'll be 5th coming into like the first week in May with a chance of getting into the Champions League they want attacking, entertaining football, which he's given them, right? So he has a first season free.
It's definitely entertaining.
Yes, right. So he has a first season free, which he's going to get. Then it's whether he gets the players he wants to get in. Because I always say give managers 3 or 4 transfer windows. And if you can see your progress, then you know he has a philosophy. You know he has an identity, which Man United haven't got. We don't even know what they're going to, way they're going to play, what the principles are. The thing I found weird about this week was when he said after the Chelsea game that there's players that he doesn't rate and not going to be here next season. That was a very strange thing to say before the end of because those
Dangerous.
players will know who he means.
And by the way, I need you to play really well on Sunday for me.
Exactly, and it's just going to be, all right, those players, not down in tools, but you don't play that. If the manager doesn't fancy me, then what's the point? That's how players will think. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because they all wanted attacking football. They was fed up with Conte, they was fed up with Mourinho, fed up with Espirito Santo. Spurs have got what they wanted to have the fans with entertaining football. So all this nonsense when people say, I don't care if my team loses 4-3 or 3-2, as long as I'm being entertained. And then Spurs fans are actually coming out and saying they think he should go. And you're like, no, just calm yourselves down. Give him this summer's transfer window. And all he's got to do, you have all these coaches with their iPads and their algorithms and logarithms. When your team isn't putting pressure on the ball, just drop off 15 yards. It's not rocket science.
He's not going to do it though, mate.
Yeah, it's not what they do. And that's the problem. I think
We'll see.
I think his stubbornness has been an issue.
That's not a new thing, right? He's always been like that. Go back to, there's that video that does the rounds of him and one of the former Australian professionals having a row over a TV show. He's in the big screen. They're talking through a link about the under-17s and the under-18s not qualifying for the World Cup or something. And he says, well, you're not going to change my mind. You're uninformed, blah, 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 blah. He's quite combative. Back then, that's 2005, 2006. This is the way this guy is built. This is how he's going to defend his position. This is what he's going to do going forward, rightly or wrongly.
I think what would worry me, and it was interesting, the comments you mentioned, Sam sent them to me on WhatsApp, didn't actually say who they were from, and I assume they were from Erik ten Hag, potentially an outgoing manager, firing a few shots as he left the exit door. Very unusual for a manager who is presumably planning on being there at least until the end of next season to start chucking players under the bus at this stage. You look at James Maddison's form, what on earth is going on there? And even Son, I know he scored at the weekend, he got a penalty the previous week, but he's not been the same player in the second half of the season. So there are players there whose levels have really dropped off. The goalkeeper got a lot of plaudits in the opening weeks of the season.
Do you want a stat for that?
He looks poor now.
First 10 games, save percentage of 78%. Subsequent 25 games, save percentage of 58%. It's a big drop off.
So
Big
why are
drop-off,
so many
so
big players dropping off in form?
I think James Maddison had his ankle injury. He hasn't been the same when he come back. And the way that Spurs play, which I've said, because I've been undercover there with Force Nigel Glasshoff quite a lot this season.
No, you haven't. You've been lauding it in their face, which is why you're now doing that Guardiola thing, where you're saying, no, you stick with it. It's all going very well for you, when you don't mean it, really.
Yeah, of course I do.
Or you want them to keep doing it because you know
there's no hidden meanings in what I say,
to
Sam,
me, it
trust
feels
me.
like you've got a bit of an agenda.
I haven't got any agenda at all. I'm not clever enough to have an agenda, because if I did, I'd forget what agenda was, and then it would be done and dusted, wouldn't it? But I said earlier in the season, the way that Spurs play, everybody says about the high line, and they rely on Van der Ven, to get them out of trouble. When Porro comes in and plays inverted, and the doggy from the other side, James Maddison has no space, especially at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, he has no space to play him because all the other teams defend very narrow and very deep. So he'd been dragged off about 3 or 4 times, and you tell he's got the ump.
But this is it, isn't it, right? He played in this new way with the inverted fullbacks, Maddison dropping deep, dictating the play. They won 8 of the first 9. They were unbeaten for the first 9 games. Then people started to realise how they were playing and adjusted their tactics accordingly. Since then, they haven't been able to get it back. He hasn't come up with a different way of operating. And the best tacticians, when they get themselves into that situation, know how to get out of it. And that's what he's now got to prove, because otherwise he is going to end up next year. You're going to have Manchester United possibly with a new manager. Chelsea, who look like they're getting slowly but surely a little bit better and might have different acquisitions. Newcastle are playing well. Villa might reinvest over the course of the summer. If not, Emery is a good tactician. You've got to give him credit for that. There's going to be more threats to Tottenham Hotspur's participation in the top 4 or 5 in the league than there were this season. So he's got to come up with something different.
Yeah, and he will say as well that he wants better players to play the way that he wants to play.
Which I suppose was his argument on Friday.
Exactly, that's going to come down. But the thing I think that he's finding a lot different is the attention and the pressure in the Premier League. When he's been, asked after games, you can tell he's just like he lost his temper at Stamford Bridge, didn't he? But to his players, he wants them to play forward.
He's always been like
but
that.
the scrutiny is getting even more, and that's why he was like everybody loved him beginning of the season, didn't they? And halfway through, because he was straight talking, he was quite affable. Now the pressure's coming on. I think you're seeing a different little trait to Ange's character.
That's what I'm saying. Every manager. Every manager.
He'll get prickly when you get beat.
As soon as they get beat, or as soon as things going wrong, they become a lot more difficult to interview. Apart from one, Thomas Frank, who doesn't matter if they win or they lose or they have a great game or a bad one, he's always just a very
Eddie
nice
Howe's
guy.
pretty grounded as well, to be fair.
He is, but even he can get a bit sort of like more reserved and defensive if they lose a game or will go through a bad spell, which they are not doing at this moment in time. And all of you lost the faith, and there's quite a few of them, by the way, including Groves over there, that was calling Eddie Howe to question, suggesting that it wouldn't even last the summer. There'd be a new boss in there. Mourinho's coming in. There's no way he's going to survive. Nonsense.
Who said Mourinho?
Eddie Howe's, it wasn't you, it was somebody else. It was another ginger.
Another ginger, was it?
Chris,
You just
Chris
lobbed
Evans.
us all together.
It wasn't. It was.
Must have been Adrian.
It was Aid, yeah.
All right, there you go.
You've all got to apologise to him because he's turned it round. They may finish 6th in the league, and I'm not joking. Europa League qualification this season, bearing in mind what they've had to go through, extra games in the Champions League, high-profile games, highly emotional games, playing some of those with players that were on the fringe of the first team because of the pure litany of injuries that they have had, is a great achievement.
It's a brilliant achievement, and I think you have to credit the Newcastle fans because I don't think I ever heard any of them suggesting that they wanted any other manager than Eddie Howe. So fair play to them. They stuck by their manager. They're getting their rewards now. I think even now they've still got a lot of injury issues. You look at their back line, young Lewis Hall making his first start of the season, played really well at the weekend. Keen to see what he can do between now and the rest of the campaign. And they've given themselves a chance, haven't they? Particularly if they've still got to play at Manchester United, and you've got to fancy that Newcastle have the momentum. United have got so many injuries themselves. So I think there's every chance that Newcastle could finish in the top 6.
They've scored more goals than even Kevin Keegan's entertainers.
And you have to say he's improved players. Callum Wilson obviously gets injured.
That's the key thing.
He's improved players individually. Anthony Gordon, if you look at him tactically, how brilliant he's been
Look at the boy
this
Murphy.
season. Yep, he's come in. His end product's a lot better.
He's kept the boy Kraft on side, who was not in the picture at all. And then when they were desperate for defenders, he's called him in. He's done a good job. And that's one of the other things that he's done really well. He's balanced and managed that squad well.
I'd like to know if they'd changed their training regime, because I saw them at Luton at Kenilworth Road and they got beat 1-0 and they were running on quicksand. They looked so leggy. And then they had the midwinter break, didn't they? Like Arsenal went away to see Salt Bay. I don't know what he's put in the beef. It must be something like amazing. But
Is his name Salt Bay or Salt Bay?
I think it's Salt
Salt
Bay.
Bay.
Yeah.
Salt Bay.
Perry gets the knockoff version.
Oh, if he I'm being corrected by Mr. Culture here.
Hey,
that's when you know you're bang
By
in
the
trouble.
way, I know mistake. Yeah?
You are a mistake.
And it just looks like they've got that athleticism back, haven't they? They've got that sort of that running ability that they'd lost halfway through the season. And
They've kept the hunger as well. You know, there's talk of Guimaraes maybe leaving. I know his representatives have been in talk with PSG, but he doesn't look like a player who's about to check out. Isak the same. I mean, what a player he is, by the way.
First, the fifth Newcastle player in their history to score 20 Premier League goals in a season. Wilson becoming the second highest Premier League goal scorer for the club behind Alan Shearer. So, I mean, those two playing together has worked as well recently as they did, in the latter part of the game on Saturday. I mean, the way they worked together was excellent.
They changed it sort of mainly of like a 4-4-2, didn't he? Whereas early on in the season, I think he was trying to play Zach like bit
Wide.
on the left-hand side and didn't really work. So then Izek went through the middle because Callum Wilson was injured. We said before, if it swap it round, if Newcastle would have come sixth in his first season and then got Champions League, you'd say, wow, that's an unbelievable job that he's doing. So he was probably a bit too successful in the first season. But I think Jason Tindall, he's number 2, needs to take a bit of credit as well because there's a trust there.
He doesn't really like doing that though.
No, he likes to keep himself in the shadows, doesn't he? But he takes stick for that. But there's a trust there between him and his number 2 and the coaching staff.
Was the whole department.
And there's an alignment there which, when we speak about West Ham, that's totally opposite to the way that West Ham are.
But
so the club's together.
The whole Tyndall thing is manufactured, isn't it? He does that and behaves that way because it takes the limelight away from Eddie. And Eddie wants to be in the shadows. Eddie doesn't want to be front and centre and lording it up. Tyndall takes that element away from him so he doesn't have to deal with it. It's great. The partnership is perfect. We know Jason. We've spent time with him. he's actually a really lovely, affable guy you would love to sit and have a chat with. But obviously he can rub up some opposition benches the wrong way every now and again. But again, that is part of his job.
So you're saying it's good cop, loud cop? Is that what it is? If they've changed it round a day, all right, it's good.
Let's talk about, we should mention just Burnley. Yeah, awful. Chelsea 5, West Ham United 0. Talking of awful, West Ham are banging trouble. Let me ask you this question. West Ham, totally abysmal. Perry was there. But is this the owner's fault? David Moyes is privately furious because he is watching this beauty pageant take place of all of these potential managers coming along and offering to take his job. It's all being played out in the glare of the media. He hasn't even told that he isn't going to be the manager next season yet. How unfair is that? And if you are the owner of the football club and you disrespect someone like David Moyes, who's, you can say what you like about his football, you can be unhappy about the fact that he's a bit pragmatic, but he's achieved a lot for the club. The players in the dressing room look at that and think, if you can disrespect that guy, then later down the line, you can disrespect all of us. And that's where you get this situation.
And you wonder if that might put off a potential replacement as well, looking at how they're handling the situation. I think it is disrespectful. I've said it on air. We know from conversations we've had with Stuart Pearce, and he's voiced this during your commentaries, that David Moyes is a workaholic. He's first one in the morning, last one out at night. I think it was part of the reason that Pearce decided he needed a sabbatical from that. But he's worked his socks off for that club. He's delivered a European trophy. He's regularly delivered European football. He obviously was at one stage earlier in the season given a very clear indication there was a new contract about to be signed. That is no longer on the table. And I think the handling is really poor. And I hope now that West Ham, they've got 2 games left. They've got one more home game against Luton. They do the right thing, the owners. They come out and they make the announcement. They're going to make a change of manager. Thank David Moyes for his efforts so that he gets a proper send-off. And actually, for all the vitriol that's directed at him from the West Ham fans, and there are more West Ham fans that want him gone than want to keep him, I think they would do the right thing and give him a proper send-off as well. I think it's a terrible situation.
I went to the London Stadium last week and there was a geezer in the who was a self-professed pearly king of Newgate sitting there with, or Newham or whatever it was, with his bucket going like this, going, donate to a local children's charity. If you don't donate, we'll give David Moyes a new contract. That is basically how they feel about it. I mean, we laugh about it, but that West Ham fans do not want him to be the new manager, but they could have handled this in a much better way.
Yeah, but David Moyes knows that West Ham fans don't want him to be the manager. And I actually think, I was at the game today, obviously, and West Ham players didn't try. They weren't trying. No, when you say you can't accuse players that.
And you think it's to do with this situation?
I think because they know the managers. It's like any job. If you know that your boss isn't going to be there and you're going to be there longer than your boss, when he's given like a bit of edge to his team talks or he's come for the hairdryer treatment, whatever, you just sit there and just go, well, so you like, mate, I know you're not going to be here next year, so you're not going to have an effect on my career. I must admit, I think David Moyes has lost his edge a little bit because I was watching him today and he was normally the David Moyes of maybe a season ago would get angry. He would get angry. His eyes would go. It'd be, pulling people about and shouting. He just sat down today. He just sat down and looked at it. And I think he thought, I can't do anything. He made substitutions at half-time with James Ward-Prowse. He could have said, change the formation. He could have gone to 5 at the back, even though they're obviously 3-0 down. So I think his attitude might be, you've got to appreciate me more than what you have because I've got you into Europe 3 times shot. And I think he's won a trophy himself as well. You know what I mean? He's won a trophy, obviously, the Conference League, and that's given him a lot of vindication for his whole career as well, that he's won the trophy. So I think when Tim Staten was appointed, everybody knew, didn't they, when that appointment was made and there wasn't going to be an alignment between the director of football and the manager, and the director of football was going to get the players in that manager didn't want, this situation was coming anyway. I think it's lack of respect. I think David Moyes should now come out and say, I'm going. I think he should take ownership of it and just say, I'm going at the end of the season.
So he might think that's David Sullivan's responsibility and maybe doesn't want to give the owner an easy way out. And you talk about the players maybe
subconsciously. Yeah, but David Moyes has got to do what's good for David Moyes.
Maybe they're not playing for the owner. Maybe they're looking at the way that David Moyes is being treated and thinking,
that was my point at the beginning.
Hold it. Players don't give a rat's backside about owners and chairman and whatever.
But they mightn't care about a manager who's being badly treated.
No, they won't. If they did, then they should be running their socks off today, right? If they cared about David Moyes,
that was the point I made at the beginning. If you're an owner and you can treat David Moyes like that, you can treat a player like that.
Yeah,
further
players
down the
won't
line.
care. No,
You
players-
might promise someone a contract and then take it
players-
away
yeah,
again.
but players-
They know that. So so actually Alex has got a point that maybe they're thinking in the back of their head, I don't like the idea of where this is going.
No, players won't care about owners. They won't care about who's taking over. Players are selfish, right? And it should be responsibility to yourself that you make sure that you give everything you have, every game that you play. Don't matter managers, don't matter who the owner is or whatever, because it's self-awareness and self-responsibility, which those players didn't have. They're letting. If you're saying about they're not playing because of the way David Moyes is treated, that's not it. They're playing like that because they know David Moyes ain't going to be there. Do you know what I mean? So that is them not respecting David Moyes.
Well, talking about players that we probably disrespected, Nicholas Jackson's now got 13 league goals. And Chelsea scored 5 goals. He's got more goals actually in the league than Rasmus Højlund, Kai Havertz, Rashford, Alvarez, Nunez, to name but a few. And also Chelsea are level on points as we speak with Manchester United. In fact, they're above Manchester United because they're on goal difference. So, how are you thinking about that nice, tight, medium Chelsea shirt you're going to have to squeeze into on the final day of the season?
I'm thinking I'm going to have to rip it. But listen,
I think you'll probably do that just by trying to put it on.
they found some form, haven't they? And probably for Pochettino at just the right time. I think if they can maintain this between now and the end of the season, it would be difficult for the owners if they were contemplating a managerial change to make that. Because clearly the players are playing for the manager. And again, you talk about improving players. You have to say over the course of the season, Nicholas Jackson has improved, not just with the goals that he scored, he's weighing in with assists as well. Cucurella all of a sudden looks a player, so I think Pochettino's probably earned the right to
calm
go.
You've been
down.
on it quick day. You know you had a day off, but have you been on a session or something?
Did you watch the Aston Villa game last
Calm
week?
down a bit. But I was at the game today, and Chelsea, I called them the under 21 development team that was trying to develop in the Premier League, which is obviously very brutal. If you look at like Cole Palmer, I know everybody said about him, he played like he was in testimonial. It was like a testimonial game because no one was tackling, no one was closing down. Do you know what I mean? There was no physicality there. And Noni Madueke as well was excellent today.
He's been much better, especially going back and tracking back.
And I think he's a good example of Pochettino being a really good man manager, because I'm told that maybe he can be problematic behind the scenes.
But he's a very confident character
on the pitch as well.
I can tell you that from first-hand
But
experience.
Pochettino seems to have found a way to manage that and get the best out of him.
Mind you, if you'd have said to Madueke, when you're playing on the right and you're cutting in left, what fullback would you want to play against? He'd go, can you put Emerson? No, I'll play against Emerson. That wouldn't be too bad for me because Emerson didn't break sweat.
I wonder whether or not Chelsea's uptick in form has been largely down to the fact that they've only had about 12 players to be able to choose from. And basically he's been hamstrung and had to play this same team for the last 3 weeks. So that sort of cohesiveness has come into the team. And interestingly, Enzo Fernandez, since he's been out of the team, Moises Caicedo has played a lot better. Now, is it because of the athleticism of Conor Gallagher, so he gets around and helps out a little bit more in different areas? Is it because there's more freedom in that area for Moises Caicedo to play in because they're not occupying the same space? Either way, it's interesting to see that Caicedo gets better when Fernandes comes out of the team.
I think there might be more communication when Conor Gallagher's in there as well. Conor Gallagher taking responsibility. He's captain, obviously. You might be just helping him in his positional play. And it's interesting today, actually, that Gilchrist, the young lad at right back, got left out and Chalobah came in. Because I think Pochettino, because he wanted more physicality because they were playing against West Ham. So maybe he's just tweaking stuff a little bit.
I only saw bits of the West Ham game because I was at Brighton. But they've done this thing recently as well, Cucurella going into midfield when Gallagher is in there and Caicedo is in there. So Gallagher can almost play 2 positions. He can play as the one that helps out Caicedo, but he can also still play as the one that goes further on and leads the press every now and again, because Cucurella comes in and makes up the numbers. So that's helped them as well. Quick on West Ham manager Lopetegui search. Is that moved further forward, or where are we with it? Because I know you've been waiting on another special text today.
Yeah, it's not come through yet, so maybe they'll have to wait until
make it
the
up,
start
normally
of
do.
next
Sorry,
week.
So just shut
make
me
it
down
up.
there very quickly, just in case I was to give it away.
But
10 till 1 Monday, it might be on there.
Absolutely, yeah, we're on a Monday, aren't we?
It's 10-1 for him to be manager. That's amazing. Great odds that.
It's a lot shorter than that. As we reported over the course of the weekend, I think Sullivan is keen to hire Lopetegui. Talks are advancing there, but there's a big swathe of support on the West Ham board with the likes of Tim Steidten, Mark Noble as well, I'm told, for Amorim. Now that's more complicated because I think he wants to be respectful to Sporting Lisbon. He clearly wasn't when he jumped on the plane and flew over, but he wants to finish the season over there, maybe win the title, and then decide on his future. I think David Sullivan will be keener to make a more swift appointment, and obviously Lopetegui is cheaper because he's a free agent. There's a big release clause when it comes to Amorim, but I do think it's a two-horse race.
Let's round things off by looking at the shambles at the bottom of the table. It looks all over, bar the shouting really, for Luton and for Burnley. Shambles for this reason. How are we in a situation where we're going into the final 2 games of the season, no one really knows what they need to stay in the division?
Well, it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing because we were expecting an announcement before the weekend. That was certainly what we were led to believe. That
we even mentioned it on the preview pod that we thought it was coming that day, because we thought that they were sensible enough to say, we know that there are big games at the bottom of the table this weekend. We need to get this done. They've had enough time.
Yeah, that didn't happen. We're now expecting it will happen this week, before the next round of fixtures. There seems to be a little bit of confidence around Forest. They might get a couple of points back. If they were to get all their points back, we would be in a situation where both Luton and Burnley would be relegated without kicking another ball.
And again,
that is a terrible look.
That's not a great situation, is it?
No, it's not a great situation, but Luton and Burnley, if they get relegated, it's not going to be anything to do with the points. It's because they're for their own inadequacies. Although, as you said there, it's not a great look for the Premier League, and it just doesn't sit well with football fans.
Absolutely, and it's also not a great look because although it may not have influenced what the ultimate outcome has been, it would have changed the season in the way that it was played. So if, for example, Luton knew right at the beginning of March or whatever it was that Nottingham Forest, they weren't going to get any points deducted and they were going to get all of them back or whatever, they would have played slightly differently in this period to get more points. There would have been more urgency about it. I think one of the big problems that Luton have had is it was almost felt like it doesn't really matter what they do, they're always within touching distance of Nottingham Forest anyway. Because up until this week, I mean, they won one of the last 15.
But
Luton.
you really think...
Yeah, they've been that close still.
But do you think that Luton and Rob Edwards would have changed dramatically the way that Luton play? Because
Not necessarily, but I think it's a mentality thing.
Yeah, but I think we've all said how a good job Rod Edwards has done getting Luton up and actually being competitive, because they've been competitive, and unfortunately for them, they've been what I've described as a half and a half team. Excellent going forward. They've missed Adebayo, to be fair. We saw his brilliant goal yesterday because he gives them a physical presence up front, but they've got defensively players that aren't good enough to play.
But you never know what happens, right, if there's a different scenario. You don't know how people react. You don't know what the outcomes of games would have been. They might have been more relaxed. They might have been less relaxed. They might have been better dealing with the pressure, less good at dealing with the pressure. Anything could have happened. But when there's no clarity, a bit like the West Ham situation, when there's no clarity, it just breeds chaos.
Also, if they stay on -4 Forest, that's not a bad point at home to Everton, because it keeps Luton in the hunt. It gives them an opportunity in these final 2 games to maybe get above the dotted line. If Forest get points back, suddenly it seems a worthless point.
Yeah. And again, if they'd known that beforehand, if they'd known on Friday that Forest had got all their points back, do you think that they would have made a better fist of beating Everton on Friday?
I think you have to say potentially. I don't think Luton have been good enough in the last 15 games.
I agree.
But you've got to be realistic. And could Luton dramatically change the way that they play? And you say like be more gung-ho.
Is it?
It is, because they've got
They drew
a structure.
1-1 and had great chances on Friday night.
Yeah,
They should have won the game
But
anyway.
I think Rob Edwards would say to you that they have to control their control, which is them. They have to concentrate on them no matter what's happening around them. And I think the Brentford game was the game at home where they got beat 5. I think that was more damaging than any of these points deductions or what could matter. That was a game that they'd be looking at thinking we could be winning this, because Brentford weren't in particularly brilliant form before that. I think that's the one that took more of the wind out of the sails than the points deductions.
Leicester are going to start with -6, something like that, next year. Is that good or bad?
Obviously, it's bad for the competitiveness of the league, and I think one of the questions that is in the script is, are we going to see a situation where this could become a regular occurrence now? 3 teams come out one season, all 3 go down the next, and I think that is what's going to happen this season. I'm pleased Ipswich have got up, because it means that the 3 teams who've gone down aren't all coming straight back up, but you wonder how can Ipswich start to compete with a team made up of a lot of players who were in League One this time last year. You look at the playoff picture, Are any of them going to be seriously competitive? I think the gap between the top end of the Championship and the bottom of the Premier League is probably wider than it's ever been.
What I mean by is it good? Is it good that we know right now that they're going to start with 6 rather than getting halfway through the season and then being docked points? Because for Enzo Maresco, and his team, they have that clarity. They know that they're going to start behind the 8 ball, and it's all going to be about survival for them, right? It's not going to be like, can we finish in the top 10? What can we do here, there, whatever? He's not going to be judged by finishing sort of 13th. If they survive, they've done brilliantly.
In a way.
And everybody has that clarity from the game.
But also, in a way, it takes the pressure off a little bit. Do you know what I mean? It's like they circle the wagons. It's us against the world. As you say there, if they do escape, and if they come 4th from bottom, then that's an unbelievable achievement. And when they've been obviously doctored that, and it's whether because of the finances at Leicester as well, it's whether what they can go and afford to go and buy the players that they think. Because Jamie Vardy, I think, what is he, 37, 38 now?
I think he'll get another year.
He's been coming off the bench more than anything, is he? Like as a squad player. So it's, if they can go and invest to make them even more competitive when they get into the back into the Premier League. Because if you look at their squad, they've got Dewsbury Hall's played brilliantly for them this season. Like Harry Winks has gone there. I know Conor Cody hasn't been playing, but they got a lot of players with Premier League experience to get them back in to the Premier League. So whether they're going to be able to kick on again, that's going to be the question.
We shall see. Looking forward to that. The playoffs, obviously, are live on TalkSport. All the Championship semi-finals, League One semi-finals, they've already started, and the League Two semi-finals are on TalkSport and TalkSport 2. The finals exclusively live on TalkSport and TalkSport 2. We cannot wait. We bring you more football than anybody else, and we absolutely love it. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. That's it. We're done and dusted. Crystal Palace, Manchester United, Monday night. Paris Saint-Germain against Dortmund, Tuesday night. Wednesday night, Real Madrid against Bayern Munich. Thursday night, Olympiacos versus Aston Villa. Saturday, we are going to Fulham to see Manchester City drop points, Perry. Aren't we?
Got draw written all over it.
Yeah, all right. We'll see you there.
Communist.